ever think about Pokemon types? You got a bunch of different elements that interact with each other in ways that mostly make sense. Like water beats fire because water puts out fires, but grass beats out water because water helps plants grow. You get the idea. All of the original 15 types have interactions just like this. But as we all know, there isn't just 15 types anymore. There's up to 18. Well, I guess 19 if you count Stellar, but who's counting Stellar? Because really, this is nothing. We would get our first new types in Generation 2. Those types being the Dark type and the Steel type. Steel was a super defensive type that had a ton of resistances. In fact, Steel had so many resistances that in Generation 6, they nerfed it by getting rid of some of them. And then the Dark type exists because they wanted to give Psychic another weakness because it didn't really have any, especially if you played Gen 1, where in Generation 1, Psychic was bugged to have it so only bug type Pokemon are super effective against it. Bad jokes aside, it was also supposed to be weak to Ghost, but then that became immunity due to some coding oversights. Not like there are many Ghost type moves in Generation 1 anyways, outside of Lick and Nightshade. In fact, it might as well have been immunity because the only real offensive Ghost type move in Generation 1 is Lick, and yeah, Lick's not doing any damage. So here comes the Dark type, which was made to be a good counter to Psychic type Pokemon. I mean, in Gen 2, it wasn't like the best counter because realistically, the only real Dark type move you're probably going to encounter is either Feint Attack or Bite, which only have a base power of 60. I mean, I guess Crunch exists in Generation 2, but only 8 Pokemon get it without breeding. Okay, I'm getting sidetracked talking about Pokemon moves, but the point is, Dark was made to counter Psychic. Even outside of a gameplay sense, Dark being strong against Psychic makes sense because darkness corrupts the mind, you know, like some Kingdom Hearts shit. And Dark is probably strong against the Ghost type because darkness can corrupt a spirit, making it evil. And Dark is weak to fighting because fighting type Pokemon are seen as these noble martial artists who would be disciplined enough not to let the evils in their mind overtake them. All of these types interact with the Dark type in a way that makes sense, except for the Bug type. Why would Bug be super effective against Dark type Pokemon? It doesn't really make any sense. If anything, some people think it should be neutral to the Dark typing. Some people might think they only did this for game balance. After all, it would make the Bug type more usable and viable in battles if it had more types it was super effective against. But I think I know why the Bug type was super effective against Dark type Pokemon. Okay, I'll admit this is going into the game theory territory, but wait, I have evidence to support my claims. Just hear me out here. I think the real reason why the Bug typing is super effective against Dark types is because it's actually a reference to Kamen Rider. Some of you are probably wondering what the hell a Kamen Rider even is, and for those people who do know what a Kamen Rider is, probably have some vague idea of where I'm going with this. I should probably explain what Kamen Rider is because there's a very good chance most of you are watching this like I pulled this out of my ass or something. Kamen Rider is a series of Japanese TV shows about these masked superheroes who ride on motorcycles. The whole premise behind the show is that the main character becomes a Kamen Rider and fights off bad guys. The way that the main character becomes a Kamen Rider varies per show. In some of them, it's a freak experiment on their body against their will. In other ones, it's literally entering the Kamen Rider version of Fortnite. Even dying can make you become a Kamen Rider. I know that sounds like a joke when he actually does die within the first few minutes of the first episode, and then he later comes back as a ghost, like a Kamen Rider ghost, and then that's the whole show. He's just a ghost Kamen Rider. Kamen Rider's plot varies per show, and while on the surface it does look very wacky and weird, they actually have a lot more depth to them than it seems. Look, I know it's saying a lot when the current Kamen Rider airing right now has one of their main characters dressed up like a chocolate bar, but it's also the same show about drug abuse and addiction. Kamen Rider still tackles a bunch of lighter themes as well, but the point is, even though the show looks very lighthearted and mostly unserious, there's always some darker themes going on under all of this wackiness. The typical Kamen Rider episode usually is about that series' Kamen Rider transforming or hench dimensioning if you want to get technical, so they can fight whoever the villain of the day is. And in between the fight or during the fight, they will sprinkle in just a little bit of plot to push the story forward. There is a ton of drama to keep you invested. And sometimes some of the non-fighting scenes are just as fun to watch as the fighting itself. Not to say that the fight scenes in the show are bad. In fact, I'd say Kamen Rider has some really good fight scenes. I would talk about one of my favorite fight scenes in all of Kamen Rider, but it's a huge story spoiler for Kamen Rider geeks, so probably not the best video to talk about that. Which, by the way, as we're recording this video, all of Kamen Rider geeks is now free to watch on YouTube with English subtitles, so please watch it because it's peak fiction. But unironically, I actually do recommend Kamen Rider geeks to anybody who wants to get into Kamen Rider but hasn't watched anything from Kamen Rider before. So now that you have an idea of what Kamen Rider is, you're probably wondering how this ties back into the bug type being super effective against dark types. You might have noticed that some of the Kamen Rider suits look kind of bug-like, and that's intentional. The first ever Kamen Rider was based off of a grasshopper, and since then, his suit was used as the basis for every Kamen Rider suit going forward. So each Rider suit still has a little bit of that bug element in their design. While the bug motif has lessened over the years, it can still be seen in the eyes of every single Kamen Rider. Well, unless you're X-Aid, which is doing whatever the fuck this is. I mean, seriously, what the fuck am I looking at? Now with this all in mind, imagine you're Game Freak for a second here. You come up with this brand new type to balance out your brand new Pokemon game, and you're trying to think to yourself, how easily can my player base understand this type's weaknesses? You have to keep in mind that during Gold and Silver's development, Pokemon was mostly just appealing to their Japanese audience. I mean, Game Freak is based in Japan after all, so it kinda makes sense. Keeping this all in mind, what weakness would you make your new evil type have that your Japanese audience would easily understand to be its weakness? No, I did not misspeak there. That is the Japanese name for the dark type. Now, when you think of something evil, you're mostly thinking about villains, mainly cartoonish ones or stereotypically evil villains. In every show that has a villain, there's always a hero to counteract them. Now, keeping this all in mind, who is the most iconic hero character in Japan? That's right, the original Kamen Rider. Now, keeping in mind that the most iconic superhero in Japan is based off of a bug, it actually starts to make sense why bug type is super effective against dark types. Also, with the exception of Amazon, all of the current Kamen Riders at the time of Gold and Silver's development were all based off of bugs. So the fact that this was before Kamen Rider started to do different themings with their suits adds some evidence to this theory. But at the end of the day, this is just a theory, so there's nothing really confirming if this is true or not. I'd like to think that there is some truth in this, especially for the sole fact that Pokemon has actually referenced Kamen Rider before. The first time Kamen Rider was blatantly referenced in Pokemon was in the Black and White anime. In the 57th Black and White episode, The Money Excel Guard to the Rescue, you can see one of the characters in that episode named Charles transform into a Kamen Rider. Funnily enough, Charles actually is also an NPC in the Pokemon games as well, and not just a random filler character in the anime. Charles in-game actually does not reference Kamen Rider at all, and those references were only added in the anime. Anyways, back to talking about his anime counterpart. From the way Charles transforms and the way that his bike is decorated, they're both huge references to Kamen Rider. On top of that, Charles even does the iconic Rider Kick, which is the most recognizable Kamen Rider finishing move. Speaking of which, it's time for us to talk about the one bug-type Pokemon that likes to kick things. Blow Kicks was blatantly a reference to Kamen Rider. I'm not gonna be like the Bulbapedia staff, which at one point debated that there was no Kamen Rider reference here at all. The fact that it's a kicking grasshopper Pokemon makes the reference pretty on the nose, honestly. While regular Low Kicks isn't a reference to any Kamen Rider in particular, particular, its shiny form is a direct reference to Kamen Rider 01. During the Sun Moon anime, you can see a ton of different Pokemon doing Kamen Rider Ichigo's transformation pose. This one's a deep cut because unless you're a Kamen Rider fan, you probably wouldn't recognize that this is a reference at all. With them referencing Kamen Rider Ichigo's transformation pose here, it makes you wonder if any of the other poses you do for Z moves are references to any of the Kamen Rider transformation poses. And the answer is a kind of yes. During the pose for Electrium Z, there is a part of that pose that is a reference to the transformation pose of Kamen Rider O's. See, the funny thing about this is the actor who plays Kamen Rider O's actually did the Electrium Z pose for a promotional video for Pokemon's official Japanese YouTube channel. It's honestly crazy to see the reference come full circle like this. Even outside of Pokemon, Kamen Rider is referenced a lot more than you would think. If you've ever played an Animal Crossing game, then you most likely have been exposed to a Kamen Rider reference without even knowing it. In Animal Crossing, there's a KK Slider song called Go KK Rider. This song is a direct reference to the original Kamen Rider opening theme. I would play the original here to compare the two, but copyright's a thing I would have to deal with, so just go look it up. Also, the name Go KK Rider is probably a reference to the first Kamen Rider movie, because that movie's title was Go Go Kamen Rider. So that's two Kamen Rider references in one, baby. In Yu-Gi-Oh! There's an archetype called the Masked Hero archetype, which is a very clear reference to Kamen Rider because Kamen means mask in Japanese. In fact, in some older Kamen Rider media, when they spell out Kamen Rider in English, they actually translate it to Masked Rider. The Castlevania series also references Kamen Rider in a few of their games. In Aria of Sorrow, there's an enemy called the Kicker Skeleton. This enemy not only wears Kamen Rider Ichigo's iconic red scarf, but he also attacks by doing a rider kick. In Symphony of the Night, there's an item called the Kingstone, which is a reference to the belt worn by Kamen Rider Black. In One Punch Man, there's a parody of Kamen Rider called Moomin Rider. Overwatch has a Genji skin, which is a vague reference to Kamen Rider. In Final Fantasy XIV's 2023 Moonfire Fair event, there is a character in that event that not only dresses up like a Kamen Rider, but he also performs the iconic Rider Kick. And something that I think is just kind of funny is that there's a random figurine of Kamen Rider Ichigo in the background of a How I Met Your Mother episode. I don't think that was an intentional reference, but it's technically a reference, so it counts. I didn't notice this until editing this video, but there's also a figurine of Kamen Rider B3 in the background. So that's two probably unintentional Kamen Rider references in one. Look, I could be here all day and name a ton more references to Kamen Rider, but the point is, it's referenced a lot more in pop culture than you would think. So it's not too out there to think that maybe the bug type being super effective against dark types could be a reference to Kamen Rider. But at the end of the day, Game Freak are the only ones to truly know if this was the intention or not. But as a Pokemon fan and a Kamen Rider fan, I'd like to think that there's enough to make a decent argument for it, but that's just a theory I came up with a few years ago. But technically somebody at GameFAQs actually beat me to it by making this post, so fuck! Hey guys, welcome back to this video. Took way longer to make than I'd like it to take, or some bullshit like that. To be fair, there was a video that was supposed to come in between this video and the last video, but I had to put it on the back burner for a bunch of different reasons why. I go more into that in the update video if you haven't seen that. But basically it was a mixture of me getting burnt out of editing for that video in particular, and then the few times where I actually did sit down and actually try to finish editing the video, new information came out. All right, fine. I'll include that information. Okay, well, now even more new information came out. Okay, fine, I'll include that. And now it's at the point where I'm basically waiting for stuff to settle down so I can be like, okay, here's all the information. Now I can finally put this video out there. Besides that, I think it's about, I would say 75% done. I haven't looked at the timeline in a hot minute, so that's just a very vague estimate. But thanks for giving this video a watch, because I was very hesitant to put it out, but it's been on my mind ever since I made this channel. But here's hoping that this video does well enough, because at the end of the day, that's all I can really hope for. Also, thanks for 1,000 subscribers, guys. Oh, that's pretty cool. I already posted like a huge thank you post in my community tab, so there's that. But I also reposted it on Blue Sky for people who don't check the community tab. I think people here check the community tab more often than I think, because that's a pretty good YouTube feature when it works, because half the time I don't know what people are going to see those posts. Anyways, besides that, I do have a 1K sub special thing planned. I just don't know when I'm working on it. It might be the next thing, it might not be, I don't know yet. But thanks again if you've gotten this far. I don't know when I'll have another video out. It probably won't be for like a hot minute, knowing me, but we'll see what happens. And until then, I'll see you guys later. Bye!